Good evening and welcome back to this week's life and from my beautiful garden. So, what do we want to talk about? What do I want to talk about this week? Uh, so last week we talked about trust, and what I wanted to do this week is delve a little bit deeper into the trust equation, and which I will pull up again. Sorry, bear with me. So the trust equation, which is credibility plus reliability plus vulnerability, all underlined with a low level of self-orientation. And the bit of the trust equation I wanted to really dive into this week is how to achieve that low level of self-orientation. What is the difference between self-orientation and empathy? And how can we achieve this? Because without this, the top thumb just won't matter, you know. So that is what I wanted to do this week. So when people have low levels of self-orientation, that deeply roots trust. And it because it makes empathy flourish, it creates a thriving environment where collaboration and innovation can bloom. And that's where we want to be in business, right? So what is a low level of self-orientation? Low levels of self-orientation refers to the ability to prioritize other people's needs, showing genuine interest and concern for their well-being. It means setting aside your personal agenda to focus on the collective good. So when leaders and teams exhibit low levels of self-orientation, they demonstrate a commitment to shared goals, mutual successes, and that in itself enhances trust within the group. So I wanted to start by playing a little TED talk that I found really quite powerful. So let's do that now. Oh, right. Okay.
And you say, I'm feeling really nervous about my presentation next week. Without missing a beat, they say, oh my God, don't stress, you'll be fine. You should see this physiology paper I have to write. It is a killer. Huh. How might that make you feel in that moment? Rejected? Dismissed? Lonely? Are you likely to keep telling them how you feel? Do you think it would make you less nervous about your presentation? Now imagine instead your friend puts her phone in her bag, looks at you and says, why? What's going on? What's making you nervous? How might that make you feel? Calm? Validated? Safe to keep sharing? The difference between those two responses is empathy. Australia is currently experiencing an empathy deficit, and it is fueling an epidemic of loneliness. We are all feeling it. Feeling lonely sucks. And it's as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases our chance of dying early by 26%. Loneliness is the next social and economic crisis facing Australia. The antidote to loneliness, however, is not the number of people that we know, but the quality of our social connections. And the foundation of strong relationships is healthy empathy.
So feeling lonely sucks. And what makes us feel lonely is that feeling of not being heard, not being seen, someone turning a conversation around on themselves, disregarding your feelings and shutting you down, making it impossible to share and be vulnerable. So I've got one scenario that I've witnessed that really brings the trust equation home for me. So imagine an employee is unusually agitated, more, there's a change in behavior. They are asked by the manager to let's have a chat. Great job from the manager. The employee feels relieved that they've been asked to have this chat to offload, and in response to that starts trusting because the manager makes himself reliable. It's there for them, so they're reliable. The manager knows what they're talking about, so they're credible. And yeah, the employee starts sharing this experience that at home there's been a tragedy. They're not dealing with that very well, etc., etc. They're really opening up. How does the manager respond? The manager responds with, yeah, I feel that too, and this is what's going on in my life. And within 20 seconds, the conversation is becoming about them. And they continue that conversation about them. Not intentionally, and the employee just shuts down. The trust is gone. They don't feel like the manager's even remotely interested in what they've had to say. And to the extent that they didn't want to work with that person anymore. So from feeling relieved to be able to share stuff, then opening up and showing vulnerability, to them being completely dismissed all in the space of less than a minute. That brings the trust equation home for me. So self-orientation is about where your attention is focused. When you're standing in front of a room and you're presenting and your pulse rate is high, your palms are sweating, your breath is shallow, fast. In those moments, your self-orientation naturally is very high because you're focusing on yourself. You're focusing on trying to get through the presentation, presenting well, etc., etc. So high self-orientation means you can think self-obsessed, you're self-conscious, you could be self-loathing, or you could be simply full of yourself. So when we're operating in a high level of self-orientation, we cannot hear others. We cannot hear their questions, their desires, their fears, their emotions in general. The noise in our own head is way too loud. So psychology goes like this. If your level of self-orientation is low and you can pay attention to someone else, if you pay attention to someone else, they experience that as caring. And if someone thinks you care about them, they are likely to trust you. On the flip side, if your attention is focused on yourself and others become acutely aware of it, and your body language will give you away and infer that you do not care about them. And rightly or wrongly, if they decide you don't care about them, they don't deem you as trustworthy. So it's hard to pay attention. Therefore, it's hard to care if it's all about yourself. It has to be about the other person. Does that make sense? So the two main components or the two big cornerstones of so low levels of self-orientation in my experience and in my view is empathy, which is slightly different to low level of self-orientation, low orientation, and active listening. practicing active listening. So let's delve a little bit deeper into these things. Let me share my little diagram. So the 7 steps of active listening. So active listening is not just hearing words. It's about fully engaging with the speaker to understand their message, their emotions, and their intentions. It's crucial in order to build trust, foster empathy, and strengthen the relationship. And it is 100% a skill that can be trained, mastered, and you will need feedback on. When you get that feedback, you can develop it, you can learn, you can fully embrace it. Right, let's start. So first step, be present. So on personal reflection, I always thought I was a good leader, but having done this work myself, my idea of productivity was to have a full schedule, was to run from one appointment to another, so I was always halfway through a meeting, I was already in my head into the next meeting. I would have conversations with people as well as typing on the computer or taking notes, or obsessively so. But that means I was not present. Therefore, how can I really listen to someone if I'm not fully present? So give them your undivided attention. Put away distractions like your phone, your computer, and make eye contact. Really, really, really important. Be aware of your thoughts and feelings. Make sure they don't interfere with your ability to listen. So block your filters. Make it about the other person's filters. Practicing mindfulness technique can really help with that. So things like, if you sit up straight and you put your feet equally weighted onto the ground, and really feel the ground beneath you. And if you're sitting in a chair, put both your sitting bones, try and sit up nice and straight. Put both sitting bones equally with equal pressure into the seat to feel really rooted. Imagine there's like roots going through the chair. And then take conscious breaths. So breathe in on a count of 4. And breathe out on a count of 4. Practicing that before you go into a conversation, make sure that you're fully present in the moment. Or if there's if it's a really busy environment, you can practice the 5, 3, 2, 1 technique, which means you in the moment look for 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch and physically touch them, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and the hardest one of all, 1 thing you can taste. Your brain has to focus so hard on finding those things in that moment that you stay fully present. And once you're in that state, you can then enter that conversation fully present. So block all them filters, be present. Super important. Secondly, show genuine interest. Use your body language to convey interest. So the eye contact, nod occasionally, lean slightly forward, tilt your head, and have that open posture. No crossed arms. Crossed arms are deemed to be defensive or like a barrier. Remember, 58% of our communication comes from our body. So if you are disinterested, your body will be speaking for you. Facial expressions need to reflect that engagement. Really control your facial leakage if the speaker says something that you don't agree with, or maybe it has gone past the filter. So make sure your face does not do the talking. Really good practice to practice in the mirror when or practice near somewhere where you can see, even in the computer, like a Zoom call, because you can see yourself. Super, super important. Avoid interrupting. We all know an interrupter, and we all know how annoying that is. Resist the urge to interrupt or interject before the speaker completes their entire thought process. You want to listen to understand, not listen to respond. And before you respond, take a brief pause, like a 3-second pause to formulate your response and give the speaker an opportunity to potentially add something to the conversation. That will really show them that you're interested, that it will show them that you're in the moment, you are listening actively, and you're in it with them. So avoiding interrupting. Ask open-ended question. So you want to encourage elaborations. So you don't want yes or no questions. But we also want to avoid the why question. So we want to use what or how, or can you give me an example? What do you mean by that? Those are really good open questions. Asking a question that starts with why infers they have to make a decision, or they have to give an explanation, and that is they might see that as being judgy, or it goes into like a negative space again. So try and stay away from the why. Clarify your understanding with them, like by asking questions like, yeah, can you give me an example? You know, another open-ended question was, how does that make you feel? Can you tell me more about that? You want to get as much information from the speaker as possible to really truly understand them. Next, reflect and paraphrase. So when we truly listened, we want to reflect back to what we've heard by summarizing what the speaker's main points are. So that will make the speaker realize that we have really listened. And you can make sure that you have understood them properly, and it completely avoids misunderstandings. You can restate the speaker's words in your own words to make them really feel connected to you. So you could start with, so you're saying that, or what I'm hearing is, etc., etc. So reflecting and paraphrasing, super powerful. Validate their feelings. Recognize the speaker's emotion and validate their emotion. I can see that you're really passionate about this. I can see this has really upset you. I can appreciate how happy you are about this. It sounds like that is very frustrating for you. It's a really good one. And then empathize with their feelings. So show empathy by sharing a similar situation. So they feel connected. I understand how you feel. I've been through something similar and it was challenging. But what we want to respond thoughtfully. We don't want we need you to stay on topic, and we need you to make sure the response does not become about yourself. So avoid shifting it to your too deep into your own experiences. Provide positive and constructive feedback and offer support. So ask them maybe how they want to be supported. What is it they need? And the benefits of this are just immeasurable. Like the benefits of trust. When people feel heard and understood, they are more likely to trust you. And active listening demonstrates the respect and concern for their perspective. It enhances relationships. So strong communication skills, and it fosters mutual respect and cooperation. There's a increased understanding. By fully engaging with the speaker, you gain a deeper understanding into their viewpoint, and that leads to much more effective problem solving and collaboration. It reduces conflict and miscommunication and increases synergy and stability. So as a summary, active listening is such a powerful tool for building trust. But by being fully present, showing genuine interest, responding thoughtfully, you can create a meaningful connection and foster positive and collaborative environments. So I want you to practice your active listening in your daily conversations, and you can journal or write down some observations about each conversation, maybe gain some feedback. What can you learn from this? Like I said, this is a skill that we all need to get better at. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm hearing you asking me, what is the difference between low self-orientation and empathy? And although they're related, there's a difference in regards to interpersonal relationships and in the context of communication. So low level orientation refers to the person's ability to focus less on their own needs, desires, and perspective, and more on the other person's. It means that the person is not primarily concerned with how the situation affects them personally, but rather how it affects others. So that can lead to behaviors such as listening more than talking, prioritizing others' personal needs over your own, and being open to other people's ideas and feedback. Empathy, on the other hand, is the ability to understand and share feelings of another person. So cognitive empathy is the ability to understand someone else's emotions and perspective or mental state. And emotional empathy is the capacity to feel what another person is feeling, like they're sharing an emotional experience. So empathy allows individuals to connect on a much deeper emotional level. And that will show up with behaviors such as recognizing and validating others' emotions, showing compassion and support, and effectively communicating, understanding, and concern. So so in regards to sort of focus versus feeling. So low level self-orientation is about where one's focus lies, whilst empathy is about feeling and understanding others' emotions. Behaviors versus emotion. Low self-orientation often influences behaviors in terms of prioritizing other people's needs and perspective, as well as empathy is much more about emotional connection and understanding. And self versus others, low self-orientation involves a reduction of self-centeredness, whereas empathy requires an active effort to tune into another's emotional state. So I hope that sort of clears it up a little bit what the difference is between the two. So let's look into empathy a bit more. Share a little empathy poster. Okay. So empathy is the ability to understand and share feelings of another person. So stepping into someone else's shoes and experiencing their emotions as if they were your own. So in the workplace, empathy is absolutely critical to building trust, fostering collaborations, and creating a supportive environment. Why is empathy so important? It enhances emotional connections. So let's give you some examples. So according to a study by Business Solver, 92% of employees say that showing empathy is an important way to advance employee retention. So employees who feel understood and heard and valued are more likely to stay with the company. 92%. Imagine the cost or the return of investment if we wouldn't have to hire all those new people, train those new people, the stress, the stability we would gain. It is the talent pool, people would stay longer, therefore they want to advance. So talent pool would be forever abundant. That would solve so many problems. It would save so much money, and you wouldn't need to find all this talent. So consider a manager who notices employee is unusually quiet and withdrawn. So instead of the unempathetic manager would assume the employee is just disengaged, having a bad day. However, the empathetic manager takes time to check in, learn that the employee is dealing with a personal loss, and this understanding allows the manager to appropriately support and show flexibility, and therefore strengthen the employee's loyalty and engagement. People don't leave jobs, they leave their managers. And we don't remember what people have said or done for us, but we remember how they made us feel. And we will never forget that. Think about that favorite teacher you have at school. Is it because that teacher was a better teacher than all the other teachers? Or was it because they made you feel seen and heard and valued and made you feel like a good part of the class? I would say it's the second one. It involves communication and collaboration. So a report by Development Dimensions International found that empathy is the #1 leadership skill for driving overall performance. Leaders who exhibit empathy are more likely to foster open communication and teamwork. So in a team meeting, an empathetic leader would make sure everyone's views and thoughts are listened to. And if a team member expresses concern for a project, they would incorporate these concerns into the project planning, acknowledging their feelings and yeah, making them part of the solution and not dismissing it. And that in turn would not just make sure the project would probably come out more successfully, but also would boost team morale. As we said, it reduces conflict and enhances problem solving. the Center of Creative Leadership reports that managers with a strong empathy skill are more effective in handling conflicts and resolving workplace issues. No surprise there, right? So when two employees have a disagreement, an empathetic manager would listen to both sides without judgment. And by understanding the underlying concerns and emotions, the manager could then mediate a fair resolution that respects both parties' perspectives. So here are the steps to achieve our empathy on the screen. Firstly, recognize and validate feelings. So we had that in the self-orientation bit and in the active listening bit as well. So think back to that body language, 58%. Acknowledge, pay attention to verbal and non-verbal cues. Rolling of the eyes, non-verbal cue. Non-verbal cue. Looking away. Being fidgety. You know, people who are disinterested tend to be fidgety, or they struggle to maintain eye contact. So pay attention to those cues to indicate how someone is feeling, and then use statements like, I can see that you're really upset about this, to show that you recognize their emotions. So an example, imagine an employee is visibly stressed about a tight deadline. So instead of dismissing their anxiety, the manager might say, I know this project is really challenging. Let's see what we can do to give you some extra resources to meet the deadline. How powerful would that be for their employee? Practice compassion and understanding. Be non-judgmental. So again, be present and block off your filters. Approach each interaction with an open mind, without preconceived notions or other people's voices talking in your head. Show genuine interest in their perspective and their understanding and their point of views. So imagine an employee makes a mistake on a project timeline. So rather than reprimanding them, we could go and say, can you tell me what happened? How can we prevent this in the future? In my experience as a leader, I've always encouraged my people I've always tried to empower my people to make decisions. And all I've asked them is to have a thought process behind the decision. So a bit like a bit of wiring. So what you want to know as a leader is what if the outcome is not as you wanted it, where do you need to redirect the wiring? So in order to do that, you need to know that thought process. So yeah, I would definitely go to that employee and go, right, okay, let's see what happened. Talk me through the scenario. Let's see where it went wrong. Hello. Hi, Samet. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Hi. Hi, welcome. Sorry, I've sort of rambled on. I've just seen that you've joined. Nice to have you here. Really, really nice to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine, really fine.
And where are you from?
I'm from India.
Oh, and how's the weather there at the moment?
What?
How's the weather there at the moment? Hot?
Yeah, it's little rainy. It's little rainy.
As you can see, we have a nice sunny day. For
Yeah,
once
I can see that.
in England.
It's sunny day. Yeah, I just saw your link on your profile and I just got joined. That
Oh, honestly, I'm so appreciative. It's so nice to
yeah,
finally have
I
an.
saw. Yeah, and I also saw your other posts also.
Oh, thank
So I just thought that I should join this webinar. Yeah.
Oh, good. So I'm talking about um empathy and if you did you look at the post about trust and the trust equation that I did last week?
Uh, no, I
Okay,
didn't see. Yeah.
let me skip back. So let me share. Sorry, all my screens. Right, so basically if you imagine, if you picture a person that you trust in your life, whoever that may be,
Yeah.
it's really simple formula to get people to trust you, and to check in with yourself as a leader or as a person who looks after people or wants to look after people, is to create trust, we need to be credible. So we need to know
Yeah.
whatever the subject is that we know what we're talking about, or if we don't have the answers, we can find the answers for them. We need to be reliable. So if people need us, we're there. So however that might be a conversation, that might be, just noticing that they have a slightly different behavior. So and just ask them for a chat. And we need to make ourselves vulnerable. So I don't really like the word intimacy. It means vulnerability, right? So
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
we're we're only human beings, so we make
Yes.
mistakes, and sometimes it is really powerful as a leader to kind of go say to someone, "Do you know what? I've made that mistake too. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. We learn together."
Yes.
However, this sum is super powerful, but it can equally destroy trust if it's not underlined by what is called a self orientation.
Self-orientation.
Yeah, and self
Yeah.
orientation
Yeah.
is basically the ability to focus less on your own needs and desires and perspective and more of the other person's. That's what it
Yeah.
means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have just I have one question that why you have divided that by S by self-orientation. How does this work?
How
Means
does it work?
C
How
plus
do you,
R plus I divided by self-orientation means how we can derive this
okay.
exactly.
So self, I think the two key things to self-orientation is empathy, and empathy and self-orientation is slightly different. So, and the other thing is active listening. I think
Okay.
if people feel, let me find my active listening thing. I did have it. 1 second. Oh no, where's it gone? So you're gonna see my messy desktop.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. No problem.
There you go. So there's 7 steps to active listening, and active listening means someone feels truly seen and heard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
in order to actively listen, we need to be fully present. So whoever is the listener has to be fully present with no distractions, no phones, no computers next to them. They have to be fully in the moment with the person that's speaking. Does that
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense? Then they need to show genuine interest. So if you imagine, our body language tends to give us away first. So we speak 58% of our communication comes from body language. So we need to
Yeah.
make sure we have a positive body language, we're open, We nod that's why people nod when they're listening. We lean slightly forwards. We maintain our open posture, and also, I call it facial leakage. You know, when
Yeah,
someone says something to you and you don't agree, or it goes through your filters and it gets a bit, oh no, what did they say? Your face tends to do the talking before,
yeah.
before your words, your mouth does.
It's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So I call it facial leakage. So
Yeah,
so we need to control our facial leakage, and Zoom is a really good way of practicing that, because we can actually see ourselves as we're talking. So
yeah,
you know, that's something that has to be practiced, because it's our subconscious drives the facial
yeah,
leakage, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Um
That's
we
absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah,
we need to avoid interruptions, or interrupting. I mean, you must, if I ask you, think of as an interrupter, you can probably think of someone immediately.
yeah,
You know, just what we want to achieve, we want to listen to understand, not listen to reply,
yeah.
right?
Is
So we need to
reply. Yeah,
so we need to allow the speaker to complete all their thoughts before we respond. And
okay.
then it's really good practice to leave it about 3 seconds. Say someone finishes speaking, and then you leave it about 3 seconds to so you can formulate a really thought through response, and also allow the speaker, if they haven't quite finished, to add something else. So you get every information out of them.
Yeah,
And
that's correct.
then we need to ask open-ended questions. So things like, how does that make you feel? Tell me more about this. What does that mean for you? But the one caution I have about open-ended question, try and stay away from any questions that start with why. Because when we ask why, that means someone has to kind of justify whatever they're thinking. It just has a negative inclination and a potential judgment attached to it.
Yeah,
So we really want to not use the word why. So things like
yes,
what or how or where, those sort of questions.
yeah,
And once you've listened to them, you want to reflect and paraphrase, right? You want to tell them what you understood from their conversation, to make sure that you have understood it properly, and then message that back to them in in your own words. So, and that really fosters that connection between the two of you, because then
yeah.
they feel really truly heard. Okay. And then
Okay.
next one is to validate your feelings, or their feelings, not
Yeah,
your feelings. So their feelings. So,
yeah,
right, I can see how this is really frustrating for you. I can see how this really fires you up, you know, and just reckon validating those feelings makes you feel like you're sharing that experience. It shows that level of empathy. And then
yeah,
we want to respond thoughtfully. So when we want to make sure the conversation does not turn about into an us conversation. So have you ever been in a conversation, or witnessed a conversation that someone approached someone with a problem, and then within 2 or 3 seconds that conversation's become about the other person again?
yeah,
Yeah. And that
yeah,
ruins trust. That is high level of self-orientation, because that person is in their own head. They can't hear the other person's voice, right?
yeah, yeah,
And that ruins trust instantly. Right? So we want to,
yeah. Got it.
so we want to ask them also what kind of feedback, ask for provide constructive feedback and support. So how can I further support you? What other resources do you need, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.? Has that helped?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And what I was
Yeah.
talking about when you joined was, and the other one
That
is,
equation. We were talking about that equation of
yeah. So I was talking about empathy. So empathy is that ability to understand and share the other person's feelings. So it's like an
yeah,
emotional, you're sharing an emotional experience with that person, which is slightly different to self-orientation.
so yeah, got it. Got your point. Got your point.
Got it?
Yeah. So you do this for your business or
Yeah,
uh
so I'm a let me just unshare for a minute. Oh, where have I gone? Zoom. Right. So I'm a um mindfulness leadership integration coach. So I come from the world of business. I've been a business leader for the last 28 years, but I've realized that a new style leadership is needed in the world, and we need to serve our employees in a different way to develop them with soft skills to become
yeah,
tomorrow's leaders, because those soft skills like empathy, emotional intelligence, um human needs, trust model, all of these things don't get taught in any kind of leadership training. People get taught how to do their next job from an operational point of view.
that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. People many time I have seen also that people are not talking about these concepts in depth, and you are telling these kind of things in depth, and I'm also getting your point, understanding you deeply, and the way you are telling you, uh, it's nice, anyone can understand easily.
Yeah, and
So my point is that why don't you make uh, your brand online, or why don't you promote yourself through online to get enrolled or get connected with many people
I am I mean
whole
that's
whole
let
around the
let
world.
me let me just stop the recording for a minute so then we can chat.